That morning, Liz Barraza was setting up a garage sale.
A Nissan Frontier four-door truck pulls up.
This person is wearing what I say go-go boots and maybe a moo-moo dress.
Welcome back to the podcast, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the disturbing death of Elizabeth Barraza. I briefly mentioned this case in my previous podcast episode, which aired last Wednesday. And last Wednesday, I didn't want to tackle this case. I wanted to have a little bit more time to look at this case because we have a lot of different details to look at. Once again, another case with CCTV footage involved, and some of my fellow content creators, especially on YouTube, have done some amazing work. Especially, I want to give a shout out to Arrin Stoner, who I actually contacted via his email, and he actually provided me with some of his footage, some of his stills and some of his images that he produced during his research. So I'm going to be looking at that as well, and we're going to be kind of compiling everything that I've looked at over the last handful of days here, looking at the case. I think I have a certain way that I'm leaning towards once again, so I can't wait to give you, I guess, my thoughts regarding this case. And then, as always, I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys, and you can leave your thoughts in the comment section of the YouTube channel. Alright, let's jump straight into it. I want to quickly briefly introduce you guys to who Elizabeth Barraza was, if you have not heard about this case before. She was the daughter of Robert Newell, so Bob Newell, because I heard people call him Bob, and Rosemary Newell. She was she also had an older brother named Robert Newell III. Elizabeth Barraza, she was born on June 26th in 1989. Now, she was born in Elk Grove Village, which is in Illinois. It's fairly close to the Chicago area. She had lived in Illinois as well as Missouri and Florida before finally moving to Texas. As Liz was growing up, she loved the Harry Potter franchise, and she was always reading the books and watching the movies, etc. She was also a big fan of the Chicago Cubs baseball team. This is the information that I've uncovered from the website that her family members had set up. So you can actually find a lot of these details at www.whokilledlizbarraza.com. It actually is an excellent website, and I've gathered a lot of my research from that website. I've gathered the timeline, etc. So if you have any interest in learning more about the case and looking into these details, please visit that website. Liz Barraza was also a very big fan of the Star Wars franchise as well, and I think the Star Wars franchise will play a little bit of a bigger role in this case later on in the podcast. Liz had graduated from Klein Collins High School in 2008. This high school is already in the Texas area, so I assume all of the moving around through different states in her life happened prior to her finishing high school. So when she was a younger person, when she was a kid essentially. She spent her freshman year at the Stephen F. Austin State University in Texas as well, and then she transferred to Sam Houston State University for the 2009 academic year. All of these universities are also in the Texas area, fairly close to Houston. I believe the previous university, the Stephen F. Austin State University, was like 150 miles north from the Houston area, if I'm not mistaken. So generally she didn't really go all that far away. Now, Liz graduated from Sam Houston State University with a bachelor's degree in psychology in 2012. She met a man named Sergio Barraza, I believe, in this Sam Houston State University. 2 years after she graduated, her and Sergio had actually married. So they married in February 1st of 2014. And also it's worth mentioning that Liz and Sergio, well, at the time of Liz's death, they did not have any children, but they did have a dog together, and they had adopted that dog, I believe, in maybe even her first year at Sam Houston University in 2009. So they had the dog for quite a while together, but no kids. At the time of her murder, she had been working at the Rosen Group, which is a company specializing in the research, development, production, and planned operation of inspection devices for pipelines and other complex technical systems. Liz worked as a data reporter there. Sergio, on the other hand, worked with his father, Oscar Barraza Sr., and he was the crew chief of installing flooring. So basically, he was the chief of the people who were installing flooring. So it was kind of a handyman type of a position that he was doing. Liz and Sergio had purchased their home in the Princeton Place subdivision in April of 2016. Liz and Sergio also loved to go to the Texas Renaissance Festival, dressed in costumes that they had created themselves. They were also members of the Texas-based Star Wars fan club called the 501st Legion Star Garrison. Liz was kind of a, I would say, event manager for this Star Wars fan club. From my research, from what I've gathered, she was actually organizing events, and she was one of the main people in that Texas subdivision of this fan club. So all of the events were kind of handled by her, and she was a very charitable person as well, as we will see in some of the future details. You know what I mean? She really cared about her kids, and I think she spent a lot of her time actually going to hospitals, visiting sick kids dressed in, Star Wars franchise costumes, and entertaining the kids, and basically just a very nice and charitable person. Found information that Liz had 2 approved costumes at the time of her murder. One was a biker scout and a Java or a Java, I'm not really sure. Her TKID, which is basically an ID given by the organization, by the 501st Legion organization, was TB93474. Now, I couldn't find it. I couldn't find this T-Kid number on the 501st Legion's website, because you can see a bunch of people on the website. You know what I mean? You could Google these people, and hey, maybe some of these people are even potential suspects in this case. So if anyone wants to delve deeper into that lane, you could definitely go and find this website and look at some people. It's basically just people who really like Star Wars, and they like dressing up in Star Wars costumes, and apparently you have to have a really good Star Wars costume to get inside of the 501st Legion, because there's actual people who are gonna approve you or not approve you. So depending on how nice your costume is will result in the decision whether you will get into this fan club or not. Shortly before Liz was murdered, her and Sergio were planning to leave for Orlando, Florida. They wanted to go to the Universal Studios and Disney. I believe it was in connection to Harry Potter. They wanted to see the Universal Studios Harry Potter subdivision, and they had planned to go on this trip on Sunday, January 27th of 2019. It was basically meant to celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary, because at that point they had almost been married for 5 years. Liz had a garage sale planned shortly before they would leave on this trip in order to make some extra money to spend on souvenirs on their upcoming trip. I believe she wanted to get something for Sergio when they're actually in Orlando, so she was kind of thinking to sell off some unnecessary items that she doesn't use anymore to get a little bit more spending money. It's very important to mention this detail when we discuss the garage sale. Other than a few signs set up in the neighborhood, the garage sale was not advertised on her social media account, so only the people in her very close proximity who live next to her, the neighbors, and her close friends and family would actually be aware of the garage sale. It wasn't something that was advertised heavily. With that being said, I would like to mention that Liz and Sergio had put up the garage sale signs in front of their house 1 day prior to the garage sale happening in the evening of the 24th of January 2019, which was a Thursday. So they put up the signs on Thursday evening for the garage sale that was supposed to take place from the 25th to the 26th. So I believe the garage sale was supposed to last the Friday and the Saturday. And then on the Sunday, the couple would fly out to Orlando with the additional pocket money already cashed in. Unfortunately, this is not how things went down. When Friday, January 25th of 2019 rolled around, it was essentially 48 hours away from their planned trip to mark their 5 years together at Orlando. Now, at around 6:17 a.m. in the morning, early morning hours, Liz and Sergio began placing tables and items on the driveway in front of her home in preparation of the garage sale. At around 6:48 a.m., so around 30 minutes later, Sergio had to leave for work, so he left in his truck. 4 minutes after he left, at around 6:52 a.m. in the morning, a black Nissan Frontier Pro 4X was captured on a neighborhood CCTV camera approaching the Barraza residence, where Liz was still setting up items for the upcoming garage sale that morning. The Nissan Frontier drove past the Barraza residence, then it made a 3-point turn, meaning that basically the car turned around and parked behind Elizabeth's car. An individual who appears to be wearing knee-high wide boots, a possible wig, and a long flowing bathrobe type garment got out of that Nissan truck and started walking towards Liz. The individual then drew a gun from beneath the robe. They pointed it directly at Elizabeth. She then took a step back and the killer shot Liz 4 times in total. Afterwards, the figure ran back to the truck and drove off. Shockingly, 2 minutes later, CCTV cameras captured that same Nissan Frontier driving back past Liz. This was most likely because the killer wanted to make sure Liz was dead, and then the Nissan exited the neighborhood. This murder does not make a lot of sense at first glance because Elizabeth Barraza isn't someone who you would think to have a lot of enemies, especially enemies that would kill her in point-blank range without thinking twice, pulling the trigger very confidently, as if this was just another day in the office. The offender or offenders, because at this point we still don't know how many people are involved in this killing, they were, or that one person, was driving a dark-colored Nissan Frontier 4X with a Pro 4X sticker on the side of the car. The murderer fired a total of 4 shots from a revolver at point-blank range and took nothing from the scene, so there doesn't seem to be financial motive involved in this murder. The murderer had driven back by the scene after having departed the subdivision as to make sure if the kill has been successful. All of this indicates, well, to me at first glance, a very personal, premeditated killing. 3 neighbors in total had called 911 to report the gunshots that they heard. The Harris County constables from Precinct 4 were the first to respond to the crime scene. Liz was taken by life flight to Memorial Hermann Hospital in Houston. She was pronounced dead at 1:40 p.m. the following day on January 26th. Liz was an organ donor. She gave her heart, liver, and both kidneys as well as her corneas to people in the waiting list for these organs. I believe by doing this she saved 4 lives, and I believe one of those people waiting on the organ list, I think the corneas actually provided vision, so she turned a blind person, to my understanding, into a person who could see again. So that was a very nice gesture, even after her death. At this point, the investigation is still very active, with the Harris County Sheriff's Office taking the lead. The original lead detective was Detective Michael Ritchie with the Harris County Sheriff's Office. However, Michael Ritchie was promoted to sergeant in June of 2020 and was transferred to another patrol division, so Wallace Wyatt Jr. is the current lead detective on this case. He's working with the case. I would also like to bring to everyone's attention that the reward for information leading to the arrest as well as conviction of the responsible party is now up to $50,000. If you have a tip, you should definitely call the Crime Stoppers of Houston tip line that you can see on the screen, and I will leave this tip line in the, description. In the YouTube channel for sure. Calling through the Houston Crime Stoppers is the only way to remain anonymous. The timeline begins in 1989, June 26th. Elizabeth Barraza was born. She was 29 years of age at the time of her murder. In 2008, Elizabeth Barraza had graduated from the Klein Collin High School in Spring, Texas. It's in the Houston area. Elizabeth spent her freshman year at Stephen F. Austin State University. This university is around 141 miles away from Klein Collins High School. In 2009, Elizabeth transferred to Sam Houston State University for the 2009 academic year. It's 48 miles away from her high school. It's a little bit closer than Stephen F. Austin State University was. Elizabeth had also met her future husband Sergio Barraza at Sam Houston State University. 3 years later, in 2012, Elizabeth had graduated from Sam Houston State University with a bachelor's degree in psychology. 2 years later after that, on 2014, February 1st, Elizabeth and Sergio Barraza married. 2 years after that, in April of 2016, Elizabeth and Sergio purchased their first home in Tomball, Texas. It's also in the Houston area. It's fairly close to where she graduated high school from. Let's move to the timeline of the incident. 2019, January 24th, which was a Thursday, this was one day before Liz was murdered. In the evening of that day, of Thursday, Liz and Sergio put up signs for their garage sale that was going to happen the following day on the 25th of January, which was a Friday, and it was going to last through the 26th of January, which was Saturday. The garage sale was supposed to make extra cash for the couple to spend on their trip to Orlando that was planned on the 27th of January. The sale was not advertised on social media. Let's jump to the 25th of January 2019. This is the infamous Friday when Liz was murdered. There are a lot of different time points here, so I wanna go over them quickly and as briefly and as clearly as possible. Let's begin sometime in the very early morning hours. Approximately 2 a.m., a black Nissan Frontier was observed on neighborhood cameras driving by Liz's house. Let's jump to 6:08 a.m. in that morning. 4 hours later, Liz drives to the local Starbucks to get a coffee. Now, Liz comes back from the Starbucks approximately 8 minutes later at 6:16 a.m. and there's a video capturing her on her doorbell camera arriving back from the Starbucks. From 6:17 a.m. to 6:47 a.m., that's approximately 30 minutes, Liz and Sergio were arranging items outside on the driveway for the garage sale. Now, coincidentally, at 6:47 and 50 seconds in the morning, the Nissan Frontier arrives and pulls into the neighborhood Princeton Place Drive from Kuykendall Road and drives into the Goddard School parking lot. Shortly after entering the parking lot, this Nissan Frontier leaves the Goddard School parking lot to conceal on a different street. 6:48 a.m. This is actually the same exact time when Sergio leaves the property, his house, to go to work in his white panel van. A couple of minutes later, at 6:51 and 40 seconds, the Nissan Frontier comes back into view and heads towards the Barraza home. 6:52 and 12 seconds in the morning, the murderer does a 3-point turn on Cedar Walk, parks behind Liz's car, and then exits, walking towards the driveway where Liz is still setting up. The incident takes place for approximately 30 seconds, from 6:52:20 seconds to 6:52:50 seconds. At first, Liz is heard saying good morning, and then the murderer speaks to her for about 6 seconds. There are 3 quick shots and then a 4th shot delivered point blank once Liz has collapsed to the driveway. This incident in all takes approximately only 30 seconds. At 6:53 and 10 seconds, the murderer starts sprinting back to the truck and then leaves. At 6:53 and 49 seconds, this is approximately 40 seconds later, Mr. D, who is a neighbor from across the street, calls 911. He heard 4 gunshots and observed the Nissan Frontier leave and return at 58 seconds into the call with the dispatch at 6:54 and 47 seconds. This is exactly when the Frontier actually drove past Liz's dead body once more. This is when we believe the culprit is trying to ensure that Liz is now killed. At 6:55 and 05 seconds, this is approximately 18 seconds after the last timestamp, which is when the culprit was spotted driving back past Liz, essentially to ensure that she is dead. The murderer exits Preston Place subdivision and then does a U-turn to re-enter the neighborhood. It was a little bit confusing because I was under the assumption that this particular timestamp in the timeline actually indicates that the murderer actually turns around. So it's a little bit confusing. I've pulled all of these timestamps from whokilledlizbarzaga.com, so you can go there and investigate yourself. Just a mere couple of seconds later, at 6:55 and 08 seconds, the truck is captured on her doorbell cam passing by Liz's house. Now, let's move a couple of minutes later to 6:58 and 24 seconds. Next door neighbor Miss O calls 911. She observes someone laying in a neighbor's driveway. She also heard 4 gunshots. She already sees police on the scene during the call. This just is an indication of how quickly law enforcement has appeared to the scene, probably way quicker than a culprit would possibly expect. This was just a couple of minutes later, and law enforcement is already at the scene. About 30 seconds later, at 6:58 and 52, Harris County Precinct 4 constables arrive to investigate and secure the scene as well. And then just a handful of seconds later, Miss B, another neighbor from across the street, calls 911. She says that someone is shot, and she saw it in her home security video. Let's jump to around 20 minutes later. At 7:19 a.m. in the morning, Harris County Precinct 4 constables enter the house to clear and secure the home, the Barraza residence. This set off the alarm that Liz had set to instantly trigger if the door was opened. She had the door inside the garage unlocked for her safety as a precaution. We don't have the next few actual timestamps, but these details happened shortly after. The Nissan truck, is tracked on several commercial cameras, but is eventually lost in an area with no camera coverage. Liz's parents are also notified by her alarm company that the alarm has been triggered in her residence, and the parents cannot reach Liz via phone. They left immediately for her home. Also, Cypress Creek EMS arrives on the scene and calls for Memorial Hermann Life Flight. At 7:21 a.m., Life Flight arrives and transports Liz to Memorial Hermann Hospital on 9600 Flannan Street. A Precinct 4 constable elects to go with Liz as a guardian. At 7:37 a.m., Rosemary and Bob Noel, Liz's parents, arrive on the scene minutes after she was transported by Life Flight. 14 minutes later, at 7:51 a.m., Sergio Barraza arrives back to the house and is immediately detained by law enforcement for questioning. Around 10 minutes later, at 8:02 a.m. in the morning, Rosemary and Bob leave Liz's house to go to the Memorial Hermann Hospital downtown. The following day, on the 26th of January, which was Saturday, at 12 p.m. in the afternoon, the trauma team administers the required final neurological exams. And then an hour and 40 minutes later, at 1:40 p.m., Liz Noel Barraza is pronounced dead by the trauma team. The life gift team assumes control of her care to prepare her for organ donation. Family and close friends maintain a presence at her bedside and in the STICU waiting room. This is what we know about the incident. Liz did not recognize the killer at first glance, as she greeted the killer by saying good morning. It's unknown whether Liz recognized the killer as he got closer to her. The killer is familiar with the neighborhood and Elizabeth and Sergio's routines. They probably knew about the garage sale as well. The killer had driven past Elizabeth's home at 2 a.m. in the morning. The killer had been up all night preparing to kill Elizabeth, potentially waiting for Sergio to leave for work. The killer appears to be wearing a disguise and is also holding what seems to be a bald man's mask, according to Arrin Stoner's findings. The killer shoots with confidence and conviction, indicating that they are familiar with handling firearms. According to Arrin Stoner's findings, the killer is heard saying, "You know what? It's not worth it," as well as, "I got you, bitch." The voice appears to be masculine. The way the killer runs back to the truck also appears to be masculine. Sergio's family member or a friend had previously leaked information that the killer had handed Liz a note. This information is not confirmed by law enforcement, though. It's unknown how many people are involved in this murder. Arrin Stoner, as well as some other sources, speculate that there were 2 people in the Nissan Frontier. It also appears that the truck was revving as the killer was running back towards it, indicating that an accomplice was involved and was actually revving the truck. The Nissan Frontier itself appears to be in great condition and shows no signs of recent off-roading activity. We're looking at a few interesting points here on the map. I want to point out a few things that really jumped to my mind. So, first of all, this is the general neighborhood where Elizabeth Barraza's residence was located. This house right here is her house. Now, the culprit or culprits, they had actually arrived from the cul-de-sac road and they entered the Princeton Place Drive right here. For anyone who's listening to this, I highly suggest checking out the YouTube channel. This might be a little bit easier to understand. Now, I believe sometime at 2 a.m. the culprit drove here. If I'm not mistaken, they were kind of scoping out the neighborhood, planning to kill Elizabeth. Sometime early in the morning, Elizabeth actually went to a Starbucks. Now, the Starbucks that she went to is actually this exact Starbucks right here. It's located in this location. Right, so she gets back. Now, Sergio leaves around 6:47 a.m., if I'm not mistaken, to go to work. So Sergio leaves for work. I believe he goes this way and, he enters the cul-de-sac road, the big main road that is adjacent to this neighborhood. The suspect, the people who, the person or the multiple people who committed this crime, they actually, for a brief moment, for some reason, they actually entered the this basic school. This is a Goddard School of Tumble, and they spent, I believe, 10 seconds in the parking lot, but don't quote me on that one. Once Sergio left the neighborhood, the killer entered the neighborhood, drove past to Elizabeth. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is how it went down. The culprit was driving in this direction. Now, this is approximately the point where they make a 3-point turn, basically turning around, and they park their car right here. this is where they parked their car. And we're gonna look at the CCTV footage shortly, and it's gonna, be a little bit more clear. Now, the altercation in the incident, as you may know, only lasted 30 seconds. Afterwards, the culprit drove out of the subdivision but then turned back around as to check if the kill is really committed. So, from my understanding, initially the culprit drove the same direction from where they came from. But then they kind of spun around and drove back to investigate whether or not the kill was actually committed. And as you can see, this is why in this particular area I have 3 time stamps here, because at 3 different times the car had passed this location, and it's all happening within minutes. Now let's remember that law enforcement was actually present at the scene very shortly after the murder had taken place. The culprit then proceeds to drive along this red line. So now it's going to be a little bit more easier to understand for everyone who's watching this. We know that this route was taken because of CCTV cameras in the neighborhood. And this was an interesting point because the culprit started driving here. Now, the more rational decision is to actually take this exact Brogan City road. As you can see, guys, this is Brogan City. This is a lot more rational to go to follow this black line on the map than it is to follow this blue line. But there's a camera, and I believe the camera, we will see a CCTV footage from this house. If I'm not mistaken, we have CCTV footage from this house, and this CCTV footage located on the driveway of this particular home actually spotted the black Nissan Frontier driving past the Brogdon CT road. That would be this road right here, and it drove past it. The truck followed the blue line and then it never came back. So we know that the culprit had to drive here and they never came back. They never turned around. That means that they had to follow the blue line. Now, if they follow the blue line, they eventually get to this cul-de-sac, which is a dead end, as you can see. And another interesting fact here is that this particular house is where I believe a constable lives. So I'm not sure if the culprit had planned this out and they missed this crucial detail, but even on the Google Street Earth view images, you can see the constable's law enforcement vehicle is parked here on basically all of the street view that is available. Now, once the culprit entered the cul-de-sac, they had 2 options. Essentially, once they reached this area, they had 2 options to get out of the neighborhood. The very first option would be to take the right immediately. This is a little bit of an off-roading area, if you can see, guys. I'm not even sure what this is, but this is definitely, there's no road here, but a Frontier could definitely handle this terrain. They could have went here, and after taking the right, they could have taken the left, and this is how they would have entered the Emerald Pool Falls Drive. Now, from the Emerald Pool Falls Drive, the culprit could have gotten out of the neighborhood by following this potential line. The other option, as the culprit entered the cul-de-sac, would be to take the left. And this is quite interesting because the left would actually have you driving just a little bit, and then you would actually enter the cul-de-sac, Kuykendall Road. Then you would enter the Kuykendall road. And I've checked, this is actually possible. And once again, this is where Arrin Stoner's YouTube video, which, you know, I highly suggest you look at his content regarding this case. I will definitely leave it in the YouTube description. You could definitely check it out. This is another route, potential route that the culprit could have taken. So what do you guys think about this? If you're gonna be taking this route, you would at least want to drive it once in your life to make sure that this is not a dead end. No one in the neighborhood seems to have noticed a black Nissan Frontier days prior to Liz's murder attempting these routes. We're gonna look at some CCTV footage. This is an interesting CCTV material that we can review, because let's look, and as it plays out, I'm gonna tell you what's happening. I believe that this particular time is 2 a.m. If I'm not mistaken, this is actually the 2 a.m. in the morning when the culprit was scoping out, you know, the area. So let's continue watching. And this is just a neighborhood camera. And we can see that the same car was spotted at around 6:47 a.m., something like that. Now, this to me indicates that this particular person who was driving the car probably had intentions to kill Liz the whole night. They didn't even go to sleep that night. They were actually, you know, preparing. This was a hit. We have another CCTV doorbell camera. This is from the Barraza residence. This is actually when Liz comes back home from the Starbucks. And this is around 6:16 a.m.
She got back from Starbucks, she came to the house. Just shows how goofy she was.
This is the CCTV from the neighbors from across the street. We will now see the actual murder take place. Please consider this. If you don't want to watch it, then please skip ahead a little bit in this podcast. As you can see, Liz is right here. This one doesn't have an audio, but we will look at one with audio. Now, this is where the culprit is already seen. As you can see, it's the culprit is outlined. They will arrive close towards Liz, pull out a gun, what seems to be a gun, and soon they will let off shots. 4 shots in total. And then point blank range, the final shot. They run in a masculine way, in my opinion. And we'll analyze this a little bit more in depth in a different one. I'm gonna show you some more CCTV now. Now this is another warning, because now we will hear the gunshots. They are quite disturbing. This particular CCTV footage that we're going to be looking at right now has been released by law enforcement, but it has been released, I believe, a year after the murder. So this wasn't released initially. And this is basically the doorbell camera from the Barraza residence. Now we see the black Frontier passing through the residence. It's gonna spin around and it's gonna park in the driveway. Notice how the culprit doesn't park in front of this camera. The culprit could have easily parked in the range of this camera. Does this indicate that the culprit is aware of the doorbell camera? I'm not sure, but this is definitely something that is good to speculate on. Also, the culprit will be seen somewhere around this particular area from this angle, just for a brief second. It's already beginning. Warning. definitely disturbing material. Now, just seconds after the shooting, we can also see the culprit is captured driving out of the driveway. Look. Now, I am curious to know, did the culprit know about this camera? The culprit could have easily parked here and could have been in front of the camera, but they did not do so. They came from that direction. Was this a pre-planned strategy? What do you think about that one, guys? Another warning, because this is by far the most disturbing footage that we will analyze today. This is basically that first CCTV camera that is positioned from across the street from the Barraza residence, from a neighbor's, basically a neighbor's CCTV footage, and the audio is actually taken from that previous CCTV that we've just watched, and the audio and the video are formed into this one file, and then also the contrast has been increased on this footage so we could see the outline of the people involved a little bit better. This is very disturbing. Please do not watch this if you don't want to see a murder taking place. As we can see, the truck parks already. As you can see, this is where Elizabeth says good morning. I just want to quickly take it back, guys. We don't even see the culprit in sight yet, but Elizabeth is already saying good morning. So at this time, Elizabeth still, well, from my understanding, she still does not recognize the killer. Listen in, this is when she clearly says good morning. See? Only now the culprit enters the angle. They move quite quickly towards Liz. It looks like they're wearing a disguise because it definitely looks like a feminine, a feminine garment, a feminine outline, but all of the other things in this case strongly indicates that this is in fact a male. They walk up. Liz is already, alerted at this particular point. And they run in a fairly masculine way. I want to bring back one last thing that I want to address in this CTV. As you can see, Liz already said good morning. This is where the culprit said, you know what? Can you hear the culprit saying, you know what? And does this sound to you like a male or a female? Listen in. Here. From what Arrin Stoner said, the culprit says, you know what? It's not worth it. I got you, bitch. Do you hear this as well, guys? You know what? It's not worth it. I got you, bitch. So, do you hear it? I don't know. Let me know, guys, in the comment section. I want you guys to listen to Arrin Stoner's take on the, on the individual's voice. So let's listen into what Arrin Stoner had to say about this particular thing.
Law enforcement have not released any details about the person who shot Liz Barraza. Incredibly, they are claiming that they don't even know if the person that shot Liz is male or female. even though we have the shooter's voice on the Nest camera audio. And clearly, this is not a woman's voice.
This is clearly not a female's voice. The way I see it, I completely agree with Arrin here. Guys, I definitely can hear what, it's not worth it, and it's definitely a masculine voice in my opinion. This is the CCTV captured from another house in the neighborhood, and this is how we know that the culprit or culprits actually drove towards that dead-end cul-de-sac. Let's watch. As you can see, the car clearly passes because this right here is the road that, would have taken them basically out of this neighborhood. But they decided for some reason to speed past to the dead-end cul-de-sac. And I have I've read an amazing write-up about this. It's on Medium, and it's by a man named Welsh Chappie. Alex Lewis, I think, Welsh Chappie, and I suggest everyone read his post. It's an amazing post to read. I've taken a few screenshots. So as you can see, this is the car. The black Nissan Frontier, and on the right-hand side, we have a conversation that Welsh Chappie actually had with the owner of this house. So the owner of this house and, owner of the CCTV camera that captured this particular angle, they actually said that, was a bit shocked from the text. I didn't tell anyone about the video clip except for the constable. I did not see it return or go the direction of Kuykendall. So essentially what the homeowner from the house that captured this vehicle passed by, the homeowner said that they did not see the car actually get back on Brogan Court. It just vanished into that dead-end cul-de-sac. There was a total of 3 neighbors who had informed law enforcement. Only 2 of them have been made public, which is Cynthia Gerst, I think she called Sergio, and then there's Candy Ellis. Only these 2 women have been publicly announced as neighbors who called 911. There's another mystery neighbor who has never been named, who had also called law enforcement. We're looking at the crime scene. As you can see, these are the items laying in front of the Barraza residence that were on display for the garage sale. I want you guys to pay attention to this particular item right here. This particular white little dot is actually a stormtrooper helmet, and it's speculated that the culprit, as they parked their car somewhere around here and as they were walking towards the residence, they actually said or asked Elizabeth, will you take 100 for it? This is once again coming from Arrin Stoner's research. Just quickly wanted to address the fact that Liz was probably the worst person that this could have happened to, because she was actually someone who would visit the hospitals dressed as a Star Wars stormtrooper to entertain extremely ill children just to make them smile. So it's insanely unfortunate that this happened to Liz, because she is dearly missed by the community. This is basically, we're looking at some information from Welsh Chappie's blog that I've copied, and this is just an indication for us how quickly law enforcement had responded to the scene, because we can see that the first constable to arrive did so at 6:58 a.m., a mere 2 minutes after the Frontier was spotted still on Cedar, and essentially this means that the Frontier had a grand head start on law enforcement of 2 minutes, 3 minutes after the constable arrived, and a mere 5 minutes after the Frontier was last seen on Cedar. A be on a lookout was, established. It goes out, and all responding patrol cars are now aware and are on the lookout for a black Nissan Frontier. How has the driver avoided being caught? Where could this Nissan Frontier be? Who does it belong to? Was it potentially rented? Was it potentially stored in one of the surrounding homes in the neighborhood? Did someone from the neighborhood had something to do with this murder? On the left-hand side, we can see the wedding picture from Sergio's and Liz's wedding. As you can see, Liz isn't that tall. It says here that Liz is only 5'2" or 5'3", and all of the men are a little bit taller than her. Now, this is actually, on the right-hand side, this is a screenshot from the CCTV footage, and this is actually just before the killing. As you can see that the culprit is definitely taller than Elizabeth. Firstly, I think it was estimated that, well, some people believe that, you know, the killer was also around like 5'2" or 5'3". I don't think that is the case, because the angle of the CCTV camera, well, it's kind of looking at, you know, the driveway of the Barraza residence from a kind of sideways angle. So we can't really assume that just because from the CCTV footage, you know, the culprit and Liz's heads are actually on a fairly similar angle, we have to assume that there is a big difference caused due to the angle. So I'm looking at this, you know, I'm thinking this person, he's definitely the person doesn't seem like he's 6'4" or 6'5", but I will say probably it's pretty safe to estimate, in my opinion, that the culprit is somewhere between 5'9" and maybe 6 foot. That's kind of what I'm feeling here. This was another quite bizarre revelation. I'm not sure if I mentioned this already in the introduction portion of this podcast, but as you can see, guys, before leaving for her new pipeline inspection data analyst job, Elizabeth actually worked at Cool Cat Party Warehouse Supplies in Spring, Texas. This location is fairly close to her, you know, to the place where she was murdered. Now, the crazy part about it is that we actually see a Nissan Titan parked. And basically, Nissans, by the way, are not a popular vehicle in this general location. It's mostly American trucks, Chevrolets and Fords. We can see the truck is actually parked in the street view. This is my screenshot. I literally went on the street view images and I found this truck. Well, someone else mentioned it beforehand, but I was able to also find this truck as well. I'm not sure if it's this. I think law enforcement said that the truck used in the murder is the Nissan Frontier. We can see a Nissan Titan here, but they're so similar. It makes you think, does this have any meaning in this case? And also whether or not law enforcement is 100% surely accurate that it was in fact a Nissan Frontier and not a Nissan Titan. As you can see, guys, the Nissan Frontier and the Nissan Titan are very similar. Now, it's been speculated that we know for a fact that it was a Frontier and not a Titan, because you can see the Nissan Titan has an emblem of, you know, the Titan emblem on the, you know, driver's doors. As you can see, the Nissan Frontier doesn't have this emblem, so maybe this is how law enforcement was able to establish that the culprit was driving the Frontier model. This is another good point from Welsh Chappie's blog post. As we can see from this screenshot that I took, this is basically from his post. I definitely want to give him credit because he has done an amazing work here. He speculates that the reason for, you know, Liz's voice saying good morning being very clear as day on the doorbell camera and the murderer's voice kind of muffled is because the murderer is actually wearing a mask. Because I can clearly hear Liz say good morning, but it's kind of difficult to establish what exactly the murderer is saying. Some more interesting thoughts here that People have said that they believe the killer was familiar with the Barraza house because they seemed to avoid being caught on the Barraza doorbell cam, as we've, addressed this already. He doesn't walk up the driveway as most everyone else would. He cuts across the grassy verge that is between the Barraza and their neighbors' homes. That is actually a very good point. The man who killed Elizabeth did not walk on the driveway like a person would probably usually do, you know what I mean? He cut through the grass as if to intentionally avoid getting captured on the doorbell camera. This is very suspicious to me. This allows him to remain just out of the Nest cam's view, and the closest he gets to being caught on that camera is the killer's arm is briefly visible for a few frames before he starts shooting. We're gonna look at that frame soon. I've been going through Web Sleuth, and this one person, MNTN Hiker, actually had some interesting thoughts. He said, you almost start to wonder about a lookout or someone who lives close enough to her house that they can see when he meaning Sergio, leaves and communicate with the killer. Now they say that they're not casting blame on any neighbors, etc. But yeah, I mean, it makes you think. Could one of the neighbors have potentially been a lookout for the murderer? And now we're looking at the viewpoint of the killer. Now, if the truck is somewhere here, right? If this is where the truck is, the culprit makes a dash through the grassy area towards Liz as to not get captured by the, this is the angle that the Nest cam picks up. They actually come here, somewhere here, and then they shoot at Liz. And only their hand is actually captured by the Nest camera. The more I think about this, the more premeditated this particular detail looks to me, and this would indicate that the person is aware of the Nest camera on the Barraza residence. This was pretty interesting. I think Welsh Chappie thinks, well, he believes that we can see a lightsaber. We can see a lightsaber. These are two different stills I grabbed from his blog post. And tell me, guys, do you think this looks like a potential lightsaber in the truck? So I've asked Arrin to provide me some of his images that he had produced during his research, and he swiftly, produced them for me, so I'm very happy. I'm a huge fan of his content, so I suggest everyone, if you're not aware about Arrin Stoner, please check it out. Check out his channel. I'll leave it in the description of this YouTube upload. Highly suggest you go check him out. He actually provided me these stills. I want to quickly go through them. I believe this still. Now, once again, I will say that most of these stills that Arrin had provided to me, I'm not really. I can't say with conviction that I see details here, because maybe I lack the context of how these images have been produced. That's why it's hard for me, but there are a couple that I will stop to, and I will definitely show you what I think I see there. And I definitely agree with Arrin, at least on one thing fairly strongly. So let's dig in here. So this is basically just a still. I believe this is from the Nest cam footage where we can see the culprit just briefly. I think this is supposed to be their head, and maybe this is their legs right here. This is, I believe, the same angle. Now, this is interesting. I'm not really sure. I don't think this is their head. I think this is an item that they're holding. Once again, I definitely lack the context of how this image was produced. Another one, I'm not really sure if I'm seeing things here. This is something, I'm definitely seeing one eye, something here, you know what I mean? Like a mouth, potentially. You can see another still as well. Some more still images from Arrin Stoner's research. And I'm gonna soon. And this one is interesting. This definitely looks like the person is holding something. I believe this right here is the item that the person is holding. If I understand Arrin's, research correctly, I think this is what they're holding. This is what they're holding. This is what they're holding in their hands. And these ones are gonna be interesting. Yeah, this is definitely what they're holding. This right here is what they are holding in their hand. The killer is holding in their hand. And Arrin suggests that the killer is holding a bald man's mask. And these masks are widely available. They only cost like $20. Easy to get, right? And this is where Arrin believes that the killer is actually holding this mask. Now, as they approach Elizabeth, the mask is already removed, but I believe what Arrin actually uncovered is that as the killer runs back towards the frontier, he is actually trying to pull the mask back on his face. And yeah, I do think that from these particular images, I definitely think this is an outline of a face. I think everything is so blurry here, but the face is probably fairly visible here. You know what I mean? This is Arrin. I think this is probably the greatest thing that Arrin had uncovered in his research, because I definitely have never seen this being proposed by anyone else. So this is an amazing work. And we have some more still images. I believe these are supposed to be the head. I'm not sure if this is a body though, or this is probably not the body because it would be too good to be true. Once again, shooter appears to be holding a mask with both hands as they run back. Shooter turning to run, mask in left hand. This is the frontier, and this is where we can pay attention. This is also from Arrin Stoner's research, and he thinks that there are two individuals in the car, one in the passenger side and one in the driver's side. And I've seen some other people mention this. This one is a very kind of indication that this could be the case, because this is what I've outlined. This is the passenger side. We can definitely see something in the passenger side. You know what I mean? We can definitely see something in the passenger side. I'm definitely seeing something in the passenger side. I'm definitely seeing something in the passenger side for sure. Yeah, so these images pretty much conclude what Arrin Stoner had provided. And the last thing I want to present to you guys in this case is what law enforcement had disclosed in the beginning of this year on January 26th. 2022. So in the beginning of the year, law enforcement has actually said that we just went to Miami to interview a person of interest to this case, said Detective Wallace Wyatt, the detective on the case for Harris County Sheriff's Office. Let's remember that prior to moving to Texas, Liz was actually living in Orlando. So in my opinion, this is probably the most crucial detail in this case, that law enforcement have a person of interest in Miami and they have spoken to them. Now, no more information regarding this particular person of interest has been released to the public. So unfortunately, this is all we have. There are a wide range of theories ranging from the 501st Legion, that someone from the group may have killed her, her work-related killing, maybe even from her previous time when she worked at Cool Cat Party Warehouse, because that business pretty much sells costumes and in particular definitely sells old man's masks or masks of similar nature. It has been speculated that maybe someone from the neighborhood had killed Liz. Maybe that's why the car kind of vanished. Maybe it was just parked in someone's garage, something like that. I'm under the assumption that we do not have a lot of information. Once again, let's remember the fact that one of the close people to the case actually leaked information that a note was allegedly handed to Liz. So I think we lack information, crucial information to actually speculate on what's happening here. I do think that law enforcement has a lot more information than we have, and I think they will probably disclose more information as the time progresses in this case. And that would be, my thoughts on the case. Please leave your thoughts in the comments section, and I will see you on the next episode. Please enjoy the rest of your week and stay safe.